Weathermen. Cuba somehow had the ability to bring out in young people at that time the feeling of communism with a mambo beat, or somehow that what was happening in Cuba was totally different than what was happening anyplace else in the world.
This was the main reason of the interest showed by the Russians in trying to control the DGI, because the Cubans could work far more easily than the Soviets.
Weren't the weather people aware that they were being used by the Soviets in some way?
No, they view the Cubans as being the vanguard of the international communist revolution. Now, the vanguard essentially means that the Cubans are at the very tip of the spear. They're the leadership. The Russians are being used by the Cubans. Now, this is the Weatherman's rationalization of this interaction between the Soviets and the Cubans. The Cubans said, you've got to become active. You've got to start doing things. And planning a national action to protest the beginning of the Chicago 8 trial and to commemorate the riots during the Democratic National Convention of '68, and to protest the war in Vietnam is not action. Action requires that you confront the system violently. So when the Weathermen got back from Cuba, they changed the national action to the Days of Rage.
The Days of Rage in October 1969 was an attack on the city of Chicago and its police department. For 4 days, anti-war protesters, urged on by agitators of the Weathermen, rioted in the streets, engaging in violent confrontations and pitched battles with the police. Quebec during the 1960s was rocked by terrorist bombings and confrontations between the police and French-Canadian separatist demonstrators supporting the FLQ. DGI contacts within revolutionary organizations like the FLQ had built an international terrorist ring.
It was late March or early April of 1970. I was in Buffalo, New York. The FOCO there consisted of 5 people. Bill Ayers and Naomi Jaffe were 2 of those people. Bill and Naomi left and went to Canada. Where at in Canada, I don't know, to meet with members of the Quebec Liberation Front with the objective of establishing closer ties with them and cooperating in actions, if possible, on both sides of the border. And they also received, it was either $2,000 or $3,000 from the Quebec Liberation Front that had been sent from Cuba for the Weathermen. There was an attempt in 1965 by a group of blacks who had gone to Cuba under my auspices to blow up the Statue of Liberty.
The Black Liberation Front, which had been formed in Cuba in 1964, was the prime mover behind this plot. The bombing was prevented, however, when the police recovered the explosives from their hiding place in the Bronx. Amongst those arrested was Michel Duclos, a member of the French-Canadian separatist organization which provided the explosives to the Cuban-trained extremists. She pleaded guilty to illegally transporting dynamite.
We know that the Weatherman underground organization went to Cuba and utilized the same kinds of techniques that we utilized. These people did engage in direct bombing and killing in the United States. So I fear it.
And yet, most of them haven't been heard from for a long, long time.
That's right, but they're still out there. They're underground. And the question is, over a long period of time, what does it take to activate them?
biggest Cuban intelligence efforts against the United States do not take place in North America.